All right, welcome to the Dales Report. And happy to be joined here today with Peyton Nyquvest, CEO of Numinus Wellness. Back to the podcast. Peyton, summer's over. Q4 is on the horizon. Excitement, it's in the air, even though, we say goodbye to this nice weather, I think, in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's always a shame to see the sun go. But I think the fall's looking really exciting.
Yeah, for sure, for the industry. A lot of optimism, that's for sure. Today's session, we're going to do something different. We're going to open up the floor to our YouTube and Reddit investors who have written us over the past month and have a number of questions that they would like to ask you directly. So we'll begin with it. First question was from one of our Twitter followers, Queens of the Trade, who would love to understand what progress has been made to get uplisted on either the New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ. So where does that sit? And is there a high probability we could see something like this in the next 6 months?
Yeah, really good question. And people might know throughout the fall, we got uplisted from just the TSX Venture Exchange to the TSX Venture Tier-1 designation, which really the Tier-1 is sort of like the TSX Mainboard waiting room. And so the plan for the company has always been get the TSX Mainboard listing and then go through the process that the TSX has to go towards a NASDAQ or an NYSE listing. So we do anticipate the TSX listing to hopefully drop fairly shortly, and then subsequent uplisting to a major US exchange thereafter.
Good news, duly noted. Another Twitter follower, Streethawk, notes that basically, analyst reports and coverage has been initiated in the space in recent times. This is yet to occur with Numinus. So a few questions. Now, we recognize you're limited in what you can disclose, but in general, is there obtaining investment bank coverage a high priority for the company's to-do list?
Definitely a high priority for the company's to-do list, but also, we've been intentional about who we're engaging with and making sure that the research that we're getting out is credible. The other thing I would add, you've seen some research reports come out, and that's been really great. It's very early days in the space still, obviously, as well. And one of the things that's been an education for the analysts as well is, the psychedelic space is this interesting interweaving of wellness, services, things of that nature, and then drug development, drug discovery, more of a pharma sort of approach. And with Numinus and sort of the depth and breadth of what we're doing, really sort of on both sides, has been a lot for analysts to sort of digest and really work through robustly. As analysts, usually pick a lane. You usually deal with a pharma analyst, or you deal with a wellness analyst. And so it's been a bit of education on that front, and just making sure that everything is being captured in regards to what we're doing, but certainly a very, very high priority for the company. And, I think speaks also volumes to the amount of bought deal financing that we raised. Most groups who are initiating coverage right now usually are doing that because there's been a carrot dangled in front of institutions that these institutions, might be raising the money in the not too distant future. We've got significant capital, so we don't really need to incentivize groups to do research for us based off of the fact that they're going to get some fees from raising capital. We don't plan on diluting shareholders in the near future. We've got, as I mentioned, significant capital, and so the research for us is much more just to support the company's valuation and give investors a deeper look into the company itself.
Very, very good point. And that's something to be heard of, like knowing the amount of money that you have raised in the past and how that obviously for longevity is going to benefit. Do you see a lot of mergers and acquisitions? Yes, it eventually will take place within this industry, but do you think it'll start happening sooner rather than later?
I think so. I think, there's a pretty significant gap in terms of funds that were raised and depending on what companies are looking to do in the space, if you're looking to roll out a full FDA clinical trial, it's a very, very expensive process.
For sure.
And requires a lot of capital. And I think the space is evolving quite a lot right now. I think the service provision side of things and what the regulatory environment is going to look like over the next couple of years is starting to form up much more than certainly it was last year. So I think there's opportunity for M&A for sure, and I think a bit of a weeding out in terms of who's here for the long game and who might not be.
Makes sense. You're a former director, VP, and head of sales at Mackey Research Capital. You have a lot of knowledge of how the sell side research game works. Saying that, is the credibility of the research bank initiating the research just as or more important than obtaining research itself?
Certainly credibility, and who's the analyst, what's their motivation for doing analyst coverage. As I mentioned, a lot of the times it's there's a financing that's coming, they're generating fees, so there's a sheet there that they can go to their accounts with. But also, who is the analyst, right? We've seen, I don't want to point any fingers, but we've seen a few industries come out in the last while with analyst reports that were fairly
aggressive,
and there was certainly some motivation behind that. So, while analyst coverage is really, really important, and as I mentioned, has been a significant undertaking for the company to get good analyst coverage. Again, making sure that the coverage is doing its job. It's informing investors or people that are interested about the company, and setting realistic price targets as well.
Good to know. Next question, and it's related around the Canadian election. We have a question from follower SRLE, who wanted to know what the federal election coming up in Canada, whether a change in government will affect this industry in a negative way. Do you believe that in general, the major political parties have a bipartisan view that psychedelic assisted therapy has a place in the future of psychiatric treatments in Canada? And want to get your thoughts based off of that.
I would say the only thing that really the election probably affects in regards to the psychedelic space in Canada is just you've now got an election that's sort of thrown into the mix, which will definitely take some focus probably away from regulatory change in the immediate.
Yeah, of course.
But I think the train's left the station. There's been a lot of representation and already a lot of changes come into play, and I think. With this supporting research that's coming in over the next couple of months in particular, I don't really see any significant changes in regards to Health Canada's enthusiasm for supporting the space.
Does a lot of your team or some of your team members work with Dr. Ingmar Gorman? No.
Well, actually, that we do have a relationship with them through our Montreal location.
Okay.
We've done some training and stuff like that with the MAPS group, who includes Ingmar. Yeah.
Very fascinating interview I had with him last week, but he was talking about how he got into this industry 15 years ago, and there was like one clinical trial annually. And to think where we are now, but he had a lot of great things to say about specific compounds, but more specifically MDMA, and perhaps could be the leading compound to be legalized. And I know you've touched on that, a little bit in the past with us, but that is a great momentum builder for you moving forward, is it not?
Absolutely. And I think, there's a lot of conversation about psilocybin, which is excellent. And I think very, very, very much needed. But MDMA is extremely significant. And we've talked about this lots on the show. But, the MAPS work is astounding. Those numbers are astounding. The safety data is astounding. And I think there's opportunity for lots of other indications outside of just post-traumatic stress disorder that you're probably going to see quite a bit of work on in the not too distant future. And also it's far more advanced. I mean, to go to your point around one clinical trial a year back 15 years ago, MAPS has been doing this with MDMA for 35 years. It's been a long road, and they've done so much heavy lifting.
That's incredible.
And MDMA, we believe will be first, obviously behind ketamine, but the next legally available psychedelic.
Think about that, 35 years studying that. And you often wonder if they ask themselves this question, do they ever think a day like, where we're in today would ever come to fruition? Because it's one thing 15 years ago to have one clinical trial annually to see where we are now. Like, if that doesn't give you any indication as to how much this industry has grown, and we've talked about in the last 12 months, I don't know what will, but definitely headed in the right direction.
I have the opportunity to talk to Rick Doblin quite a lot, and we were actually speaking last week, and I regularly poke him with the question, is this how you sort of thought it going, or he always his comment is always the same. He said yes, and he's been wondering what the holdup has been. But it's funny. You see comments from people going, what's the company doing these days? What's the holdup? We haven't seen, there's been no significant news releases in a month and a half. And then you see a group like MAPS, who's been doing this for 35 years,
35.
35 years raising not-for-profit capital, and now have a drug, MDMA, with astounding results in phase 3, and they're anticipating 2023 potentially as the launch date for MDMA. So just hats off to them, and an amazing amount of work that they've done.
Rick Doblin's name, he's one of the most influential people, of course, within this industry. What's it like speaking to him, I guess, a couple days a week and getting to know him personally? Like, describe to investors that are interested in this space and as it grows, what's he like and what does he bring to this industry?
I mean, the tenacity, the passion, and sticking to his integrity, right?
Yeah.
You've seen and this is one of the things we talk about, that I'm sure there's days that are so frustrating for him, how much money he's raised, not-for-profit capital, getting MDMA to where it is in a not-for-profit, which I think is extremely important. I think a not-for-profit to bring through regulation provides accessibility for people. And he's amazing, man. He's so optimistic. He doesn't skip a beat. And I think he's just getting warmed up, to be honest. When he talks about what's next, he's already looking, to some of the big things that I think to come, not only in North America with MDMA, but globally. And MAPS is really intentions of taking it global. And that's really exciting.
Oh, well, you said it before. 10 years from now, as we go and get our biannual, dental checkups, this will be part of the conversation as well. And I think 100% that's going to happen. But it's great. Two more questions. One, can you provide an update on when you expect the MAPS sponsored single arm open label safety and feasible study evaluating MDMA assisted therapy for PTSD will go into clinic? Last we had heard it was in the pre-implementation stage.
Correct. Yeah. So we've got Health Canada approval. We're just waiting on an ethics approval. We do plan on launching that sometime this fall. Can't give exact dates as it's sort of in the approval process now. But the Health Canada approval process is a huge step forward. The facilities are ready to go. We've trained a significant amount of practitioners in the MDMA training, so it's really very close, and we're obviously extremely excited about it.
It's great. Fall time, lots of stuff going to happen. Last question. How does Numinus, one of our followers on subscribers on YouTube, how does Numinus Wellness expect to monetize generic drug compounds without IP protections? Or is that not an issue with the clinician model side of your business?
Again, looking at MDMA, like there's really no IP protection. Even psilocybin is a naturally occurring molecule in nature. So it can't be patented. We've filed some patents around our process around production of a naturally occurring psilocybin mushroom. We see opportunities on the patent process more around the production side and the formulation side, while not being restrictive. I don't think there's a place for restrictive medicines in the psychedelic therapy space, especially if this goes to a decriminalization type of movement or something more broadly accessible. Those patents are out the window. And so for us, it's more around the drug production side of things that we have some patents filed around. And then really coming down to the therapeutic model, right? Ultimately, psychedelics are going to be a service based model. It's psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. Again, you look at the MAPS, look at the MAPS data. It shows that the therapeutic container is as important, if not more, than the drug itself. And I think psilocybin is going to be similar. I think the groups that figure out scalable service models, whether that's group work, whether that's using virtual tools, and that's been a lot of our work over the summertime, is how do we make this cost effective and accessible for people? And then start to look at insurance coverage, public health coverage, all of those different types of mechanisms that we have within the healthcare system in Canada and in the US.
Do you have any concerns whatsoever with some of this medicine eventually one day not being accessible for people? I know it's a pretty tough question to answer, but a lot of people I speak to, it's like, they love the progress that's making, but they have doubt that, big pharma is going to eventually come in and make it very hard for people to obviously afford or have access to this. But what's your response to that?
My concerns are less about big pharma necessarily. At some point they're going to show up some which way in the space.
Yeah.
I think, again, I think it's going to come down to getting coverage. I think it's going to come through, some collaboration and working together as well. Big pharma is a big machine. The healthcare system is a big machine. So there is some industry collaboration that's needed, and so far from what we've seen is happening, which is great. I don't think it gets to a place where it's completely inaccessible for people, but I do think there's probably going to be an approach where, these treatments aren't necessarily cheap. But I think the thing to always keep in consideration is, if you need knee surgery, you're going to spend 5-10 grand. People do that.
Yeah.
It's, the same should be, if I have debilitating depression or anxiety or suicidality or addiction, right? You look at the amount of money that we spend on addiction. And again, looking at the MAPS work, curative intent, 3 treatments, no more PTSD for over 66% of people.
That's the big thing, right?
It's amazing. And so, the way we've looked at mental health to date is, here's an antidepressant, you're a depressed person, here's some kind of SSRI, and we're going to treat you for the rest of your life. And it's this financial drip that people, just get comfortable with paying. Yeah, I think with this, it's alleviating the symptom, curing the symptom, and getting people to living, fuller, happier lives.
That's the big thing. Cure and not having to be attached to it for the rest of your life.
Exactly.
Well, I hope you liked all the questions from all the investors that love the company right now and are interested in learning more. But great job in handling a lot of this stuff. And let's keep in touch. And thanks for checking in here today on the podcast.
Sounds great. Good to see you.
All right, you too, Peyton. Thank you.